standard number 5. What do you do that for? So, in this power standard, we're really focusing on 3 main areas. We're focusing on author's POV, or point of view. We're focusing on author's purpose and author's choice. So let's do some defining. The first thing, point of view. There's 2 definitions of point of view. The first is perspective of the narrator in a story. Typically, this is going to be for your fiction works, your made-up stories. Then we have, for nonfiction, we have the stance or opinion the author has on a topic. Purpose. Author's purpose is the reason why an author writes anything. It all starts with the purpose. So once you have the theme, or once they have the message or the lesson they want you, the reader, to get from their story, then they decide why do they want to write it. And then lastly we have choice. Choice is the deliberate decisions and deliberate techniques the author uses to write, impact, and engage the reader. So, why do we need to learn about author's POV, purpose, and choice? Well, firstly, we want to gain better insight into the author's true motives. And then it allows you, the reader, and the decipherer, to analyze and break down a text to its rawest literary elements. Lastly, it helps you figure out the theme, central idea, and make better inferences. But the most important one of all is VIP number 1. Learning to master how to figure out the author's POV, purpose, and choice. It's on the ELC, so you gotta know it. Uh-oh. Alright, so let's recap. Let's go all the way back to maybe your last year, your previous year in school, maybe all the way back to middle and elementary school. One day your teacher came up to you and said, we're going to talk about author's purpose. And they said there are 3 reasons why an author writes. They probably told you a little acronym to remember. When you're thinking about author's purpose, think about a nice piece of pie. And they're right. But there's one more we want to add now that we are a little bit older. We want to add D, describe. So there are 4 reasons why an author writes. Number 1, they write to persuade you. They write to inform you. They write to entertain you. And they write to describe things to you. So, instead of a piece of pie, how about saying, you got pied? VIP number 2. Persuade, inform, entertain, and describe. Now, a text, just like it can have multiple themes, it can also have multiple purposes or reasons why it was written. So sometimes a writer could be writing to persuade you and entertain you at the same time. Now, let's talk about author's point of view. So, with author's point of view, depending on what genre you're in, fiction or nonfiction, you're going to have different things. So, the first one is first person. First person narrator means the narrator is completely involved in the story. The story, the action and the plot and the conflict is actually happening to them. They're experiencing it and they're letting you in on their experiences. So, but it's only one viewpoint. You don't know what anyone else is thinking, and you don't know what anyone else is feeling. All you have is the vantage point of one person. So in that respect, it's really low credibility. The next thing we have is second person. Second person is used really for instructions. It's really conversational, and you can pretty much kind of trust it, but it's VIP number 4, it's the least used. Third person, omniscient, is probably the best point of view you can look at when you're reading a piece of fiction writing. Why? Because the narrator knows everything about everybody. They know the thoughts and feelings of every character, and they know the thoughts and feelings, of course, of themselves. So it's very, 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 very reliable. The next thing we have is third person, limited. So, the narrator is outside of the story, just like our third person omniscient. However, they only have the vantage point and the thoughts and feelings of one character, not all of them. Lastly, we have third person objective. Third person objectives means no thoughts, no feelings, just the actions as they're happening in the story. So this one you have to really rely heavily on your inferences. Ugh. Now, the next one we have is when we're dealing with nonfiction or informational text. So, typically, the point of view of an informational text is always going to be first person. However, it's going to be more objective in nature. So the author is giving you their thoughts and feelings and opinions regarding a topic. They strengthen those thoughts and feelings with facts and evidence. It's very persuasive in nature. It's heavy in deliberate word choice. And they use different persuasive techniques. But a good informational text author knows how to be objective in all of those techniques. So, now, let's talk about author's choice. So, author's choice is 4 critical factors. The first thing an author has, remember, author's choice is that deliberate techniques and decisions an author makes. So there's 4 critical factors that go into those decisions and techniques. Number 1 is the effect it will have on the reader, or the impact. An author never does anything without first thinking about that. That's why it's number 1. This is VIP number 5. The author's number 1 goal is the effect or the impact it'll have on the reader. The next one is how it will strengthen their position, story, argument, or theme. Number 3, how it advances the story or the argument. They're going to use certain specific things in their author's toolbox that they feel will advance or strengthen their argument and, of course, impact or affect the reader. Lastly, the impact on the story or the argument. So those are the 4 critical factors that go into an author's choice or an author's decision. Now, an author has a plethora of items in their author's toolbox that they can use. We're going to focus on 5, the 5 major ones. The first one is figurative language. This is talking about tone, mood, imagery, symbolism, and irony. These are all different figurative language tools, aka literary terms that will help the reader with number 1 and number 3. And these literary figurative language allows the author to jump off or cross the page threshold. It allows them to actually be in the room with you as you're reading and experiencing their story. The next one is the use of rhetoric. Rhetoric is just a fancy word for word choice. So, a goal of any good author, if they're trying to impact or affect the reader, is to not speak over the reader's head. So it allows the author to strengthen the figurative language used. If an author decides to write a children's book, they're not going to use 11th grade level words. They're going to use words that the child will understand because, number 1, is their goal. The third one, use of persuasive techniques, aka rhetorical devices. So, we have some words you should recognize. Ethos, pathos, logos. Remember, ethos is the moral credibility of how they use their morals and their credibility to persuade you. Pathos is them using emotional techniques to persuade you. And logos is them using logic and common sense to persuade you. Then we have techniques like repetition, restatement, rhetorical questions, and propaganda techniques. Number four in the author's toolbox is plot, characters, conflict, settings, and themes. These are the 5 factors factors and features when you're writing a short story or a piece of fiction. So they're mainly used to develop the author's purpose. And they're used to create and enhance suspense, foreshadowing, mood, and tone. So they might use the rising action to do something. They might use the climax. They could use the inner conflict. In the short story, The Later of the Tiger, Frank R. Stockton uses conflict. He wants you to see the inner conflict that the princess has so that you understand the choice and decision she had to make so that it can better impact and affect your decision to decide what came out of the door, the lady or the tiger. They use the setting, and then they use theme. Lastly is text structure. Text structure is typically found and used in informational text, and it allows the reader to customize their argument. Now, typically there are 5 main text structures that you're going to come across. The first one is chronological. Pretty much chronological, in order. It explains how things happen. So you'll see keywords like first, last, later, then, and finally. The second one is compare and contrast, where you have a topic and you discuss the similarities and differences of that topic. The third one is cause and effect. It shows relationships between an event and the result. So you can have the causes and then their effect. For example, the causes of texting while driving. What are some causes of texting while driving? And then you'll discuss the effects of texting while driving. Next you have problem solution. You're presented with a problem, and in the same text they give you the solution. Lastly we have sequence. It's the information given in order or the process. So it's going to go in order. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, so it's time to practice. Let's see how much you remember. Alright, so let's start here. A pamphlet urging people not to eat animals or use products made from animals or animals suffering because the author thinks that is cruel and unnecessary. So the text is a pamphlet, and it's urging people not to eat animals. So I'm thinking it is what? Persuade, entertain, or inform. The correct answer is persuade. All right, let's look here. It says, I was born on the 18th of July, 1918 in Mavizo, a tiny village on the banks of the Magbashi River in the district of Yamatata, the capital of Transiki. The year of my birth marked the end of the Great War, the outbreak of an influenza epidemic that killed millions throughout the world, and the visit of a delegation of the African National Congress to the Versailles Peace Conference to voice the grievances of the African people of South Africa. Mivozo, however, was a place apart, a tiny precinct removed from the world of great events, where life was lived much as it had been for hundreds of years. So, how would you define the narrator's point of view? First person, second person, third or omniscient narration. So, I'm thinking it's first person because I see the pronoun I. Let's look at the second question. Why do you think Mandela, and this is an excerpt from his autobiography, why do you think he wrote it? I don't think it's C. But it could be A and B. So I'm going to go with D. Let's read this one right here. How does this sentence enhance the tone of the story? She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. So the first thing I notice is a couple of key words. I'm looking at enhancing the tone. The tone is the mood of the text. So I see dull, and then I see words like gray, and then I see that she's repeated that word. So clearly she wants me to know that it's gray. So how did that enhance the tone? Show love and happiness? Definitely not. When I think of love, I don't think of the color gray, and I don't think of dull. Illustrates the overall dullness, lack of colorful life the couple feels at the beginning of the story. Illustrates the level of poverty. No. So we're left with B. Harry Potter and the Half-Baked Plot. So, the question says, what is the significance of the expression half-baked in the title? So half-baked means it's not all the way baked. So that means it's not fully cooked. When something's not fully cooked, it doesn't taste good. So, it could be this one. So, if I know anything, I know that the DVD, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. So it looks like they're trying to have a play on words. So I'm looking at D. All right, let's look at this one right here. You try it. Invitation to the game. Once again, I see some personal pronouns that mean the narrator's in the action. So we're going to go with first person. And lastly, we have two texts that have text structure. Passage 1 and passage 2. Go ahead and read them, and I'll come back to you in a second. So, what kind of text structure is number 1? If you said compare and contrast, you are exactly right. What about number 2? If you said chronological, you're also exactly right.